Imagine having an exposed domain controller that is out on the internet. It is only a matter of time before a successful compromise happens, and that is exactly what happened to one of our clients. In today's video, I am going to walk you through an alert that was generated for this particular activity, and I will also share with you how I would approach this to identify what happened. This is the same type of work that our members inside the MyDFIR SOC community are doing right now. At the end of the video, I'll also share a report that one of our members had completed as part of their investigation. So if you want to experience the same thing for yourself and not only build real SOC skills with my SOC Accelerator program, but to also apply it inside of the SOC simulator, you want to check out the link down below or head over to school.com/mydfir. With that being said, let's jump right into it. So this right here is my SOC simulator over at the MyDFIR SOC community. Currently, I am dealing with an alert here that is called Identity Administrator Account Logged In. And right now, my goal here is to determine whether or not this needs to be acted on right away, or this can be put into a lower priority. So let's quickly go over the rule description here. It says that this alert is triggered when a login event is detected using the administrator account. These accounts have elevated access and are often targeted by attackers to gain control over systems or the domain. Any of the authorized IPs have been whitelisted. Please review any new entries. Perfect. Now, if I take a look at the query results here, we could see that the time generated is September 2025 for 20:10 p.m. UTC. As for the account itself, it is currently administrator, and that is correct because if we don't see that, then this alert would be incorrect. Looking at the computer here, it is targeting our domain controller, or at least our client's domain controller. And just by clicking on any of the event, over on the right-hand side, we do have an expanded record here. So I'm looking at the details. I do see my tenant ID, the account, our computer, which is again the domain controller, and our event ID of 4624. This one is an account was successfully logged on specifically for the Windows Event Security log. Scrolling down here, we do have an IP address starting with 45.227. It is a logon process name of user32 and a logon type of 10, aka RDP, or Remote Desktop Protocol. And I believe that is it here. Let's put in some notes. We know that this particular logon occurred on 2025, September 2nd at 16:20:10 p.m. UTC. In other words, 4:20 p.m. And the user of administrator logged in from the IP. Let's go ahead and copy that, and I'll paste that into my notes. 45.227.254.154. Now let's quickly do some OSINT. I'll head over to Abuse IPDB, paste in that IP address, and wow, I see that this IP was reported 596 times with a confidence of abuse, 78%. Let's see. Yeah, there's just a bunch of reports, about 3389, so RDP, brute force. Cool, let's put that into our notes. So this particular IP address was reported how many times? 596 times, 596, with confidence of abuse, 78%. Now, my next question is going to be, did this IP address log in using any other account? And did they log into any other computers? To check that, I'll just go ahead and copy this IP address. And let's head over to our advanced hunting. Over in the SOC simulator, we do have Sysmon and Windows event logs being forwarded specifically from our domain controller. So what I can use is the security event table, which will contain our Windows event logs. I could filter directly for the event ID of 4624, which again is the successful account logged in event. And right now my time is set to last 24 hours. What I'll do here is just set it to last 3 hours just for now. And essentially what I want to look for is the field name for the IP address, which is right here. So now I can filter where IP address equals, put in that IP. And I am going to keep last 3 hours just to make sure, but it is good that we don't see any specific time. But if we filter for the time of interest, which again, if we take a look at our notes, on September 2nd at 16:20:10, we should be able to find some interesting information. I'll zone in directly to our time of interest using where time generated between date time. Let's do 2025 0902. This was at 16, so I'll start it there. And let's do another date time, and I'll do 2025 0902. And let's do 1 hour after that event. Now, if I search for that, it says unexpected error occurred. Why? Well, let me take a look here and see why that is. And interesting, what I'm going to do is just refresh, or actually copy this query and refresh my page. All right, let's try that again. Paste that in, hit run query, and it worked. Cool. And we do see that it is administrator, administrator, and administrator. There are 3 events from this particular IP address. Now, just to make sure, I am going to filter this out and then look for the last 30 days. And look at that, there's a lot more events. Interesting. Now I need to see, okay, they are still with the administrator account, and it is towards the domain controller. The last event from the administrator was at 5/17/08. That is the last known successful login. And I am going to add that to our notes. So 2025 0902. The last successful login occurred on 17/17/08 p.m. UTC. And I'll say last successful login from administrator from 45.227.254.154. And I am going to sort this actually. So sort by time generated. And I'm going to sort it by descending order. Now the latest event is at the top and the earliest is at the bottom. So if we scroll all the way to the right, and if we take a look at our logon type, we could see that, hey, there was a logon type 3, which was likely due to some kind of scanning activity. And then they eventually logged in via RDP. And then we do note another logon type 3, logon type 7, 3, and 7. So if I see logon type 7s, this tells me that this threat actor came back to do some interesting activity. Whatever that interesting activity is, we don't know yet, but we are going to find out. And if I take a look at the workstation name, look at that. Their workstation name is B_114. I am going to put that into my notes. Threat actor infrastructure, just for now. Computer is B_114. Perfect. And let me just put the IP address too. 45.227.254.154. Great. Just in case that they utilize a VPN or some sort, what I can do, because I identified the workstation name, I could actually say where workstation name equals B_114. This way, if they utilize, let's say, a VPN and it has a completely different IP address, I should be able to capture some events using their workstation name. Is it the same IP? Ah, look at that. Okay, cool. So I proved my point right here. There is another IP address that we weren't aware of. That is so cool. Let's go ahead and put it into our notes here. 45.227.254.153. This is perfect. When did this happen? Okay, this occurred at September 2nd, 5:55 a.m. Ooh, so that means we found an earlier event. Okay, I'm loving it. This is why we start building a timeline. That way we can follow the chain of events. 2025 0902. This happened at 5:55:59 a.m. UTC. The user administrator logged in from 45.227.254.153. I am going to search this up on our abuse IPDB. It's going to be the same, yeah, simply because of this network range here. So reported 446 times with a confidence abuse of 59%. I'm not going to write that down. We already know that this particular network, or at least these 2 IPs that we checked, are doing bad things. So now let's go back over to my advanced hunting here. And I do want to double check something. I'm going to put in where IP address in, and let's paste in that IP along with the other IP address. And I will summarize. Oh, whoops. I took out the C here, put that back in. And now I will summarize by computer. What I'm doing here is just making sure that I'm covering my bases, just in case I might have missed something. So essentially, I am scoping it out, right? I want to know if there were other computers that these two particular IP addresses logged into. Because if I was just searching and focused on the domain controller itself, I might be missing something bigger if I don't do this check. Now that we've identified the login activity, the next thing I want to take a look at is the process events. So our sysmon telemetry. And if we take a look at the current time generated, I currently have it as 16, so aka 4 p.m. But we identified earlier based off of our other check, it was actually way back around 5 a.m. So I'll go ahead and change that to 05 and all the way up until 17. Or you know what? Just to be safe, let's go ahead and just do the next day. How about that? So now we're covering our bases. Now I am going to copy this query and we're going to look inside of our sysmon events. The table that we want to use here is called Windows event. And I'm going to say where, or I'm a liar, I'm not going to say that. I'm going to just paste in that query and let's remove the pipe just like that. And I am interested in the user account of the administrator. I want to know all of the activity that occurred between that time that was sourcing from the administrator account. Now, let's just say that I am not entirely sure what field name to use to zone in and filter for a particular user. So what can I do? Well, let me go ahead and comment this out by putting in 2 forward slashes. And I am actually going to comment out the other one too. So our time generated. And let's just say let's do take 5. So now I have 5 events. And what I'll do is expand the first event from the top, scroll down, and we do see a system user ID, but I'm not convinced that this is actually it. And if I continue to scroll down, I happen to see what is called an event data. Let's go and expand that. We get our rule name, UTC time, process GUID, image, target file name, and aha, user. This is likely the field name that we should use to zone in to our user of interest. So to do that, I am going to type in where event data dot user. I'm putting in a dot because it is essentially an expanded field here. And I'll go ahead and remove these 2 forward slashes, just like that, and the take 5. So where event data dot user ends with, and I'm going to type in administrator. Now we do get a bunch of events, so 137 events. Let's expand our first event from the top, scrolling down to our event data, expand that, and we do see the user of administrator. The next thing I'm going to do is perform a project. That way I can take the columns and display what I want. So I want the time generated. I want the image, so the process name. I want the process command line. And let's do the user as well, just to make sure, along with the parent process, event data dot parent image. And lastly, event data dot, let's do the file path. And I'll actually put in another where event ID equals 1. So this will let me look for all process creations. And here we go. Let me sort the time again. So sort by time generated, and let's do it in ascending order. How about that? That way the earliest event is at the top, and then we can scroll down slowly to follow the chain of events. So this right here happened around 4:20:24 p.m. We do see a run DLL here, and I noticed that there's no process command line. What that tells me is that this right here, the event data.process command line, is likely incorrect. So what I'll do is go ahead and comment out the project, run the query, expand the first event, expand event data, and okay, so it is just command line, not process command line. So go ahead and remove process, and I am going to rerun this. Beautiful. Now we have the tables that I want. Okay, let's follow the chain of events again. So September 2nd, 4/20/24. Taking a look at our notes, the first login was at 5 a.m., but it seems like there wasn't really any processes created during that time. And it actually started around 4 p.m. which was when our administrator logged in from this particular IP address. And again, 4/20/10 is when they logged in. So now, when I'm looking at the first event from the top, this is likely their activity. Their as in the threat actor's activity. I am going to collapse this just so you guys can take a nicer look here. And let's expand the parent. Oops, what did I do? Let's expand that, expand the command line, and expand the image. Okay, now let's begin our investigation. This is so awesome. Let's see here. We do have a couple of interesting things. I mean, I see a shutdown.exe unexpected. This is likely when they logged into the server itself. And I'm not entirely sure if you have any experience logging into a domain controller when it just shut down unexpectedly. But essentially, when you log in, there is a dialog box that says, hey, your computer shut down unexpectedly. And that is what we see here. So that's essentially that. And then we get a ctfmon.exe. And the one that I'm most interested in is this PowerShell. This PowerShell occurred at 4/20/48. And if we take a look at the record here, the parent image is Explorer. And you know what? Let me go and put that into my notes. So this happened on the 2nd at 16:20:48 p.m. UTC. Administrator launched PowerShell. And we get some funky business going on here. We have NetSH. So what they're doing is modifying our host firewall. Sneaky, sneaky. That way they can start performing whatever they want to perform. So this one here is setting the advanced firewall to a group called Network Discovery and enable yes. And then after that, they opened up a command shell. And this is within seconds. So what this tells me is that this activity is likely automated, by the way. We see that cmd.exe went ahead and installed AnyDesk. For those that don't know, AnyDesk is a popular remote monitoring and management tool, aka an RMM tool. And a lot of threat actors love to utilize these tools to gain access back in to the environment. And the next event, AnyDesk did execute. We can confirm this based off of the event ID 1. What else? We have an echo, and it's with this funky string. So far, I am not entirely sure what this particular string is. Now, it could be something of interest, so I will go ahead and copy that. And rather than putting in each event, I am going to just do a quick summary here. Firewall was modified, and they enabled a group that is called Network Discovery. Network Discovery. Whoops, let me go ahead and correct that there. There you go. And installed AnyDesk, cmd echo, and let's paste in, or actually, yeah, let's just paste in this entire command here. What is this? So that's just a note for myself to identify what the heck that is. Now, we might not be able to identify that, and that's okay, but I'll just put this here just in case so I don't forget it. Literally after a second, there is a registry key that was created, and that is for AnyDesk. That makes sense because they went ahead and installed AnyDesk here. And then they stopped AnyDesk, as we can see from this net.exe. It says stop AnyDesk, and they started it. Okay, 4/21/55, they performed a net user specifically for this account, WDAG utility account. And what they are currently doing here is performing a discovery. They're trying to understand the environment. Now, you might be wondering, why do I see net.exe and net1.exe being executed? And that is essentially just the behavior of net.exe. Whenever net.exe is executed, net1 will also execute as well. Just a quick FYI for you. What that means for detection engineers and threat hunters, you could also utilize net1.exe to search across your environment. Afterwards, around 4/21/56 p.m., they added a guest user with this particular password. That might actually be a signature of some sort, maybe. So I'll go ahead and copy that. And I'll say guest account was enabled with password. And then just a note for myself, maybe a signature. And what this will allow them to do is log in or sign in using the guest account. By default, the guest account is disabled. So by adding in a password and saying, hey, the guest active is yes, go ahead and enable the guest account. They then went ahead and added the guest to the administrator's local group, essentially providing them with administrative privileges. They then deleted the guest from the user's group. Okay, this is really good information. Let's add that into our notes. Guest account was added to administrators group and removed from users. Scrolling down here, they're just continuing on to do some discovery or at least get some information about this particular guest account. And that seems to be it. There's nothing happening after 422. So 422:17 p.m. was the last activity from our administrator account. Let me put that in here, 2025, 0902, 16/22/17. Last activity or last known, or actually I should specify, last process execution activity from administrator. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's the last activity because we do see a last login from the administrator on 5:17 p.m. The next thing I'll do is rather than looking specifically for event ID 1, why don't we go ahead and see what kind of event IDs that this particular user had generated? Or actually, rather than deleting and removing all of that, I'm just going to comment that out. And I'll do a summarize by event ID. That way I can pivot into what could be some interesting information. Now we have event ID 13, 1, 7, 12, etc. You might be wondering, what are these event IDs? And what we can do is Google Sysmon event IDs. Heading over to Microsoft's documentation, scrolling all the way down here, we can eventually find events and the event ID. Now let me go ahead and sort this. Sort by event ID. And we can take a look here. Event ID 29. What is 29? That is file executable detected. Oh, okay. Let's take a look at that. And what I'll do is actually copy these. Let's just put them in our notes. Event IDs for Sysmon. And remove my comment. Let's do where event ID is 29. What do we have here? Ah, okay. AnyDesk, program data. That makes sense. We did observe that. The next one is event ID 26. 26 is file delete detected. A file was deleted. Okay, let's take a look. So this is PS1, which is just a PowerShell script that gets created whenever you open up PowerShell. And yep, same thing. Okay. The next one is 22. 22 is a DNS event. I am willing to bet that this is related to AnyDesk because we did see that AnyDesk was executed, and upon execution, it probably reached out to AnyDesk. We do have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 events. Yep, download.anydesk.com. This is where they went out and downloaded it. And this is just the domain controller itself. What else here? Yep, same. And I believe that is the same thing too. Yeah, okay, cool. So it's really just the AnyDesk query right here. The other ones were just LDAP and the DC itself. Next is 17. So 17 says pipe created. This event generates when a named pipe is created. Malware often uses named pipe for inter-process communication. All right, let's take a look at 17. There are 2 events, and this one has create pipe. Yeah, PowerShell, okay. And then the other one is AnyDesk, AD printer pipe. I would guess that this right here is a threat hunting opportunity as well. Search for AD printer pipe in your environment to see if you have AnyDesk. Now, of course, you could obviously do that via the file name and the file hash itself, but you never know. Those are quite easy to change. The next one is 13. This one is a registry event. This is a value set. So we did see this earlier when we were taking a look at process create events where they created a registry key for AnyDesk. And I am going to assume that that is what we will see here. Now there are multiple ones. Let's go ahead and expand this one from the top. And we see a set value for ctf-mon.exe. What is ctf-mon.exe? Well, what we can do is copy this and head over to ChatGPT. What is that? And ChatGPT says it's a legitimate Windows process. It supports user input such as speech recognition, handwriting, etc. Can I disable it? Not recommended. Okay. Yeah, looking at the summary table, what it does, manages alternative inputs. All right, let's go back over to our advanced hunting and open up the other ones. We do have an explorer.exe here and it's set value, but we don't really see exactly what it does. That's okay. Let's keep on moving on. And yeah, we can see that the process of server manager is the one responsible for creating these ones. So that is okay. And server manager.exe, again, is whenever you log into a domain controller, if you happen to see that pop-up window that says, hey, this is where you can install your roles or uninstall roles, that's essentially the server manager there. And what this looks like to me is that whenever the server manager.exe opens up, like the process is executed, it would then likely set the value of this registry key. Don't quote me on that, but that's what it seems like here. There is the shutdown event that we saw earlier. We do see AnyDesk set value for the target object. And just as a reminder, actually, AnyDesk was installed under C program data. Now, the reason why I am taking a note of this is because I do want to perform a search later on to see if there are any other files that were dropped inside of this directory. So let me put a note for myself. Check if any other files were dropped into this directory. Okay, we have 4 more here. Again, AnyDesk. Now, of course, you can do this a lot quicker, but I just wanted to show you just going through each event in itself. I personally think it provides a lot of value, especially if this is your first time seeing this. We have mmc.exe, which is the management console, and PowerShell. Okay. What else is here? There is 12, 11, 7, and 3. So we have 4 more event IDs here. Let me go ahead and search up event ID 12, and that is registry event, object create and delete. We do have one event here, and that is delete value for ctfmon.exe, and the process that was responsible is explorer.exe. Is that related to our threat actor activity? I don't know. Event ID 11 is next, and that one is file create. Okay. And if you recall my notes, I did put in check if any files were dropped into this directory, the C program data. Using the event ID 11, we can determine that. Expanding the first one here, we have PowerShell. Yeah, it created the PowerShell script, which again is created whenever you open up PowerShell. And oh, what is this? Target file name, test path fear. Is this a typo? I'm assuming they meant test path here. I am going to note that down. That is a finding. This occurred at September 2nd, 16, 2052. 2052, 2025, 09, 02. Administrator used PowerShell to create a file called test path fair under C Windows. Essentially, what this threat actor is doing is testing its permissions. Can they create anything under the C Windows directory? Because this directory requires elevated privileges to create anything inside of it. The next one is another PowerShell script. We have anydesk.exe, that one we know. And anydesk, okay. There is anydesk serviceconf.lock. If I were to assume, this is when anydesk is trying to install its service. And yeah, we get that again. Do keep note though, it says syswow64. This tells me that this particular AnyDesk executable is a 32-bit binary. Why that matters is because threat actors love to utilize 32-bit binaries regardless if the architecture is a 64-bit or not, because 32-bit programs will typically always work. So searching across your environment for syswow64 binaries is a great threat hunting activity. Baseline your environment and go from there. The last one is, okay, PowerShell doing a startup profile data interactive. What else do we have here? We have 7 and 3. Okay, we're almost there. What is 7? 7 is image loaded. So the image loaded event logs when a module is loaded in a specific process. Now we are going to get a lot of events here, 49 to be exact. So I'm not going to go into each and every one of them. Instead, I'm just going to create a project. So just like that, put in a pipe project event data.image and event data.image loaded. Now I do need to correct this and surround it into a toString, event data, just like that. Oh, whoops. Okay, let me comment out my sort by. There you go. Now I'm just taking a look very quickly to see the image loaded, aka the DLLs. Are there any DLLs inside suspicious directories, such as temp, maybe the user public, or from the program data that we saw earlier where it was hosting AnyDesk? Currently there is server manager. Yeah, we don't care too much about that, but PowerShell here. There are DLLs. Yeah. Here we do see AnyDesk. And if I take a look at this, so this amsi.dll, this is essentially our anti-malware scan interface DLL, and it's under the sysfile64, which again is a quick tell that this AnyDesk is likely a 32-bit process. Now, it is possible for threat actors to abuse this particular DLL to bypass our Windows Defender, just as an FYI. There's also WMIC, which is kind of interesting. We didn't see any of this particular activity inside of our process create. So it may or may not be related. The last one is event data 3. Okay, I need to modify my project. Right now it's just showing me the image. And what I'll do actually is just, since I know the fields, I'll just do source IP. And let's do toString event data.destination IP. And then let's do another one, destination port. Perfect. I'm going to expand all of these columns and then let's scroll down and take a look. So PowerShell right here, it's reaching out to port 80 over on this IP address, 104.18.30.170. What is that? That is Cloudflare. This could be when it was trying to reach out to AnyDesk and obtain that binary. But what we can do is say where event data.destination IP equals, and then comment out my project. I can take a look at the timing. This was at 4:21:07. And if I take a look at my notes, 4:21:07, just gonna put that in here, 4:21:07. PowerShell called out to the IP at 104.18.30.170 on port 80. Now, I should have put some times for this now that I think about it, but that's okay. Very quickly, let me just double check here. I'll also sort the time just to make sure. It was at 4:21:07. So 4:21:07. Right here is 4:21:06. And if we expand that, that is installing AnyDesk. Cool. And if I were to go into event ID 22, 4:21:07, expand that. That is when it called out to AnyDesk. And we also see the IP here. Awesome. Taking a look at my notes here, we pretty much covered everything. I am going to say no files were dropped at this time. And rather than searching specifically for the event ID, I'm just going to search for everything. And I'll switch my sorting from ascending to descending. That way it will show me the latest event at the top, which in our case is 4:22:17. I believe I did note that down here. Yeah, right here. Okay. 4:22:17. This is the last process execution, but what I'll do is rename this to last sysmon activity observed from the administrator account. Do recall that they did do some modifications to the guest account. Now, if we focused solely on the administrator account, we could be missing out on a lot of stuff. So now let's shift our focus over to the guest account. The first thing I'll check is my security event table, where the event ID is 4624 and the user, so the target account equals guest. For the last 30 days, is there anything? Nope, no results found. Okay, what if I say ends with, and then I'll say guest? Same, no results found. Perfect. This tells me that the threat actor didn't log in with the guest account just yet. They likely had set this up for later on. So if I were to leave my domain controller for maybe another week or two, we could get some more interesting activity. And that's what I'll do. But for now, let's search up our sysmon stuff. So I'll do Windows event. And actually, instead of rebuilding everything, let me go ahead and use my current query here and just switch out my administrator with guest. Yeah, there are no event IDs associated with this account yet. I'm actually very excited. I hope they log into the guest account and utilize AnyDesk. Ooh, I can't wait. Okay, what else here? So I can say no guest account login. And it appears that it's only the domain controller because we did check for the other computers. So incident affecting only the domain controller. There was that weird echo. Ah, that's right here. Okay. I'm going to copy that. And let's change this back to administrator. And let's do where event data dot command line contains that strange string. So this is it right here. And with sysmon data, we could utilize the process GUID to follow any related events specific to this process. So I'll change this to where event data dot process GUID equals, and let's paste that in. Remove the string. Let's take a look. Okay, there's only one event. Now I am going to remove the date and time. I don't want to be restricted to that anymore. Same, one event. Okay. And also now that I think about it, let me do where event data user ends with guest and remove the time restriction. Yeah, okay, cool. So I covered my bases there. I am kind of curious to know what that echo is, but right now we have to work with what we have. The last thing I'll do here before I end out the video is take a look at the device process events. This will contain all of my endpoints that have Microsoft Defender for Endpoint installed. And what I'm looking for here is, were there any strange activity between that time of interest? And if so, let's dig into it. Scroll up and let's copy our query here and let's paste that in here. Now it is going to show us quite a bit of events, 3,794 events. But I'll also put in the filter of where account ends with administrator. And there are no results found. So that tells me that there was likely no lateral movement utilizing the administrator account. But what about the guest account? None. Okay, cool. What about process command line? And we'll say contains guest. Whoa. Oh, okay. Collect guest log. Okay, never mind. We are all good here. And I was about to have a lot of fun. Okay, yeah. That is good. That is good. What about administrator? Yeah, nothing. Okay, cool. Now that we have our notes, we can begin crafting up our investigation report. This right here is a report that was completed by one of our community members specifically for this particular investigation. Now, if you want to learn how to build a report similar to this one, I do teach it in the SOC Accelerator, which again, you can find inside of the MyDFIR SOC community. And to start off, we have our executive summary here. So the member went ahead and provided some quick information about this particular incident. They included the impact, the risk, status, and the required action. So what needs to be done right now? Next, we move on to findings. So what this member had found during their investigation. We do have initial access. They confirmed that the DC was indeed compromised. There was persistence and just a lot of great information here, especially within AnyDesk communications. We move on to the investigation timeline. And I did mention this previously, but the timeline is incredibly important. Because if you don't build out a timeline, it is going to be incredibly difficult to follow the chain of events and understand really what happened. So I am very happy to see that this member had completed a timeline, and I do teach this in the SOC Accelerator. We have the 5 W's, 1 H, so who, what, when, where, why, and how. Then we move on to the MITRE ATT&CK techniques. This is really cool. They broke it down into the tactic and mapped it to the technique as well. We have our recommendations and next steps. So what needs to be done immediately to contain and preserve evidence? We have the remove persistence because we did indeed find AnyDesk, and also the guest account. I also harp a lot on scoping, and I'm very happy to see that scoping was done here. They provide instructions on how to scope out this incident within the environment. So look for any AnyDesk across the environment, find any hidden install entries, verify the guest account, all that good stuff. They also include how to harden it as well, which is always nice to have. How do we reduce the risk of a future compromise? Well, we know that the DC is exposed to the internet, so maybe lock it down, right? Of course, enforce MFA, deploy LAPS. So if you guys don't know what LAPS is, it is a local administrator password solution. I believe that is the acronym, but we can always check here. Let's see, Windows Local Administrator. Oh, there we go. Okay, perfect. That is the correct acronym. Continuing on here, we do have the IOCs, so your indicators of compromise. And finally, the appendix. This will contain some of the screenshots for proof of evidence and, of course, the OSINT activities as well. Anytime I'm investigating a real compromise, I always get super excited. And the best part is being able to share that excitement with both you and the members inside the MyDFIR SOC community. Seriously, watching the growth of those who put in the work is such a great feeling. If you ever felt like you just needed an extra push to reach your goals, or if you lack confidence in your practical skills, I invite you to check out the community in the description down below, or again over at school.com/MyDFIR. Inside, we work as a team, investigating alerts, sharing reports, and helping each other grow into amazing analysts. I'll also teach you the core SOC skills with my accelerator program, so you can start performing investigations just like this one, and also create reports like the one our member had shared. If all of this excites you, I can't wait to see you inside one day. Remember to stay curious and do things differently.